Content warning. Episodes of Grey Matter may contain themes and depictions of extreme mental illness, traumatic bodily harm, and death. If you aren't in the right headspace to engage with those depictions right now, maybe this episode should wait for another time. Otherwise, proceed with caution.
Hey there, and welcome to Grey Matter Video, the only video store where madness comes free. Have you ever woken up with a great idea, only to share it with someone and be told that it already exists? Perhaps someone stole it years before you thought it up, or perhaps the human machine is more predictable than we'd like to admit. There is another option, though, one that the self-declared mystics love to bandy about as a convenient source of their so-called power. It's called the noosphere, or more commonly referred to as the collective unconscious, and it's the idea that there is some shared mental space common to all human minds. And while many think the idea is pseudoscientific hokum, we all have to acknowledge that it's a neat way to tie up some of the loose ends of human consciousness. But is being innately connected to others a good thing? Or is it only a functional way for social insanity and misunderstanding to spread unchecked? And if we are all connected, what is the nature of that which connects us? Is it good? Evil? Indifferent? Or so totally alien that an attempt to understand it is like trying to have a quiet conversation with a hurricane? This tape is called The Call of Cthulhu, and it's about the strange ways the thoughts of separate human minds repeat. But you already knew that, didn't you? The Call of Cthulhu. Written and directed by Jonathan Inbody, and adapted from the story of the same name by H.P. Lovecraft.
It began, as some things do, with a dream. I stood, alone, in some primordial dark under black pulsing stars. The obsidian floor smoldered beneath my feet, as if it was the solid magma of the still cooling earth at the very moment of the planet's first dawn. The place seemed colorless, black and white except for an overwhelming green glow. I breathed in the warm, heavy air and tried to walk, but when I moved my leg, it felt as if I was wading through deep water. There were shadowed shapes of oozing green all around me, looming over me, and even the black stars glimmering in the sky seemed to do so as a mockery. In all that space, there was nothing. No one. Just me and the Emerald City. Suddenly, everything began to shake. Rocks fell, the ground cracked, buildings toppled and collapsed. Then it stopped. A second later, it started again, a punctuated earthquake with the cadence of terrible footsteps. In the distance, a pitch-black, miles-high shape lurched suddenly into my field of view, bulging and heaving as it took another lumbering step. When its gigantic foot came down, I raised both my arms to cover my face. And then I woke up. I was in bed, arms raised above me, and the room was still shaking. I looked around in a panic, watching the lamp topple and the things on my desk bounce and slide. And it was only when I heard car alarms from outside my window that I managed to calm myself down. It's only an earthquake. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, then sank back down into bed as the rumbling slowed to a stop. I checked my phone. 4:17 a.m. It was a few hours earlier than I needed to get up for work, but there was no chance I was getting back to sleep. Hours later, I got to the Randolph Carter Psychiatric Hospital 40 minutes before my first session of the day started. As an art therapist, I had found a way to tie the two great loves of my life together, sculpting and psychiatry. And although the inpatient group format was less than ideal, certainly kept me on my toes. That morning, I had a group of just under 20 patients, representing a wide variety of mental illnesses and severity of symptoms. And from the looks on the nurses' faces as I headed for my classroom, I guess that no one here had slept any better than I had at home. All right, guys, I know we're all tired, but let's get started. Now, I've got kind of a fun exercise for you all today. I've been thinking about it ever since that Aurora Borealis was visible a couple weeks ago, and the earthquake last night clinched it. Not to mention the fire smothering LA like Sodom and Gomorrah, hurricanes threatening to turn Florida into the next lost city of Atlantis, and tornadoes scooping up houses, farm girls, and their little dogs too. It feels like every time we turn around these days, we witness an event that our ancestors would have called a sign of the apocalypse, or an act of God. And whatever your relationship is to the divine, whether you treat it as myth or you feel like you have a personal connection with it, there's an image conjured in all our heads when I invoke its name. Think about it right now. Capital G, God. What does he look like? Or she? Or they? Or it? Today, I don't want you to limit yourself to the realm of human experience, and I don't want you to worry about being cliche or over-earnest. I just want you to sculpt your own personal idea of God, so we can all take a look at it. And as you work, just focus on your own clay, your own conception. Don't look around or peek over shoulders because you get self-conscious. Just make the image in your hands match the image in your head. All right. Let's check back in half an hour. I sat at my desk and waited, watching my patients work as I wondered if I might get something interesting. I mean, there were almost countless images that could be conjured by the term. From the overbearing shepherd of the Abrahamic religions to the elephant god of India or the feathered serpent of the Aztecs. I mean, most were loosely humanoid, but otherwise human creativity was nearly unbound. So, when they finished, and with a quick glance I realized the silhouettes all looked the same, I could feel the enthusiasm slide out of me with one disappointed breath. Okay, let's go around and describe our pieces. Tell us what it's supposed to be, why you think the image stuck in your head, and what you think your idea of God can tell you about yourself. Let's start over here with Emily. Emily?
Sure, Dr. Wilcox. My idea was,
Speak up, Miss Danforth. I know it's early, but let's try to keep the energy up.
okay, my idea was something I saw in a dream. I was dreaming about it last night, before the earthquake woke me up.
She turned her stature around so the rest of us could see it. The shape of the thing was vaguely humanoid, but bulging and bloated, with the swollen head of an octopus and undersized dragon wings folded at the back of its shoulders. It was sitting hunched on a squat square block, with its clawed feet curled around the edge, and its small arms resting on its thighs. Above a throng of tentacles covering the bottom half of its face, there was a scattered collection of beady eyes. As I stared at it, I thought of the distant, mile-high shape from my dreams. All at once, the hairs on the back of my neck rose on end. Well, it's certainly original. What do you think your image tells you about your conception of God?
Maybe I think God is distant, alien, or frightening.
Okay. Well, we'll put a pin in that and circle back around to it during the discussion. Who's next? I scanned the faces of my patients, then caught one looking back at me. I motioned towards him, then glanced down at his statue and froze. It, too, had a familiar shape. The same corpulent body, clawed hands and feet, a throng of tentacles. It was even squatting on a stone pedestal. Mr. Wilmarth, should I assume that you copied from Emily, or do you expect me to believe that great minds really do think alike?
No, I didn't. It was just the image that sprang to mind. I know I'm no Richard Pickman, but I thought it was good.
Well, I'm not saying it's bad. Why do you think that image sprang to mind for you?
It just felt right. What's that quote about sculpting? Seeing the angel in the clay and setting it free?
Okay, why don't we go to someone else? I looked around at the other pieces sitting in front of the patients. Some were larger and others smaller. Some with more detail and others with less, but they all looked the same. Give or take the number of eyes, fingers, or feelers, the figures all matched. Humanoid, octopoid, draconic. The form was unmistakable. Whatever the style or level of skill, it was as if every statue had been based on different views of the same model. Guys, this isn't... I don't know if you all thought this would be funny or what, but it's not. This was supposed to be... Did anybody sculpt something that isn't this thing? Just raise a hand. Yes, William, go ahead.
It's Dr. Legras.
Not in group, okay? That's too formal. We're all at the same level here.
Then why do we have to call you Dr. Wilcox?
Just, please, William, just tell us about your piece. I looked up at his unshaved face, trying to keep in mind that only weeks ago he had been an educated professional. Now the shaggy man looking back at me resembled a caveman, with large discolored bags underneath his deep brown eyes. He turned his sculpture around to reveal a pile of unmolded clay, with a clear mark of a fist at its center. And what does your piece tell us about what you think of God, William?
God is the lasting imprint of bad intentions. God is the lie of order imposed on the truth that is chaos. God is the box in which we try to stuff this world.
Great. Fine. Why don't we break into small group discussions and we'll come back to the art later. I tried not to let it bother me as we finished the session, but even at a distance of the tables across the room from our circle of chairs, the matching statues felt like they were leering at me. I hated the sick, low feeling of familiarity that greeted me every time I looked at one. There was coincidence, there was unease, and there was this. I did my best to guide the discussion away from gods and dreams and back into the grounded realms of science and human behavior. William, Dr. Legras, didn't participate, but that wasn't unusual. What was, however, were the looks he would give me whenever my eyes caught a glimpse of one of the statues. So, when the rest of my patients returned to their rooms, I asked them to come to my office for a one-on-one session. I'm surprised you don't have more to contribute to today's discussion. My understanding is that you've got quite the impressive resume. Theology, psychological anthropology, I don't even know what that one means, but you worked as a theologian, isn't that right? A professor.
Unless they've replaced me while I've been in here, I still do. And as I've explained to you people 100 times, I have a conference in Rhode Island next week that I need to attend. I have to be out of here by then.
Well, we'll leave that for your care team to decide, William. For all of us here, the important thing is that we get you back on your...
Why don't we skip the pleasantries, Wilcox? You want to talk to me about the idols. You want someone to tell you what you already know.
You mean the statues?
That's how organized religion began, you know. Statues. The first images of the Bronze Age gods were statues, built in temples to eat the sacrifices of grain and meat offered by the uneducated farmers outside. And they did eat, supposedly. Physically consumed the offering just like a living thing. Granted, nobody but the priests ever saw them do it. And the priests never seemed to go hungry. But they started something that remains with sniveling humanity to this very day. They gave an image to what had once only been an idea.
You look like you recognize the image. The one the other sculpted. Is it the image of a god? Something you've come across in your studies?
You really don't know yet, do you? Do you think it's a coincidence that I ended up under your care? It may be the god. This isn't the first time, you know, that the image has spread like a disease. Just last summer, there was an architect that lost his mind in Seattle. He turned in designs for impossible buildings, shapes and corners that couldn't coexist, not under any laws of physics as we know them. After he was hospitalized, someone figured out that if you loaded his designs into 3D mapping software, layered them on top of each other with the same fixed point at the center, it made a face. I should have known that it would follow me.
Follow? You mean the image?
When you've seen it once, you see it everywhere. It exists within us. Call it genetic memory or whatever else you want, but the image is there, nestled somewhere between the folds. Our brains are as deep as the sea, Dr. Wilcox, and whether smooth, ruffled, or mountainous, that ocean is not silent.
I'm not sure I'm following you. Someone in Seattle modeled the same image that everyone sculpted this morning? How is that possible?
A couple of millennia ago, the Greek oracles used to inhale hallucinogenic gas rising from the thermal vents in underground caves. One of them, she came into psychic contact with something, some force. She said there was something deep down in the ocean, nestled between tectonic plates like blankets and warmed by the molten core of the earth. Some massive, unthinkable thing sleeping at the bottom of the sea. She kept going back to the thermal vent, inhaling more and more of that gas to try to get a better look at what she once saw. And finally, she went mad. She came to believe that we, all of us, are nothing more than an unfortunate byproduct of the slumbering god's dream.
William, this isn't making any sense.
Maybe not now, but it will. You'll need this information, and soon. I can't. If this medicine wasn't... If I had access to my work, I could make you understand. If you could just read my papers.
Is that what this is all about? William, you had a mental breakdown because of your work. You almost hurt people, remember? You told your son he's not real. You were hospitalized once before, weren't you? Long time ago. Did that have anything to do with...
Please, you don't understand. It's spreading. Can't you see that? Haven't you felt it? First, it was only some distant, half-forgotten caveman fear. But now, it's pushing out into our subconscious, How long do any of us have before it breaks through?
William, you need to calm down.
Don't look at me like that, like I'm crazy. I'm the only one who's sane. It's waking up. You're supposed to.
I'm going to need a nurse in here.
Why won't you listen to me? Why won't any of you listen? Check up on what I'm saying. Verify every word. Read the Necronomicon. You'll see. Just read. God damn you.
That night, I laid down to sleep and stared up at the dark ceiling, silently hoping for pleasant dreams. There was always a logical explanation for things like this. So why couldn't I sleep? Finally, after 40 minutes of soothing ocean sounds playing from my phone, I drifted off. I felt my body sway back and forth in the tide of uneasy sleep, then felt as the waves began to quicken and grow choppy. Suddenly, I was sputtering, thrashing to get above the surface of a black, churning ocean as green lightning danced across the cloud-covered sky. I gasped in a breath as a wave slammed down and then struggled to get back to the surface before the next wave came. I looked around frantically, desperate to find any sign of land, then froze with fear. In the distance, a massive emerald city sat in the midst of the storm, surrounded by billowing emanations of glowing boreal light. The buildings were jagged, twisted, impossibly layered and wedged together, and at the center of the city, a dark shape slowly rose. It was heaving, hulking, swelling, and growing like a pulsating tumor of green, sickly flesh. I saw the outlines of membranous wings fold open on its back, the reflection of countless eyes shining out at me in the dark, and a teeming throng of wriggling, writhing tentacles stretching down from the bottom of its face. Ripples of it, shades of it, flashed across the sky, echoing like impossible four-dimensional mirages that burst out like dancing lightning and faded like thunderclaps. It was consuming everything, becoming everything. I woke with a gasp and clutched my bed sheets, terrified that I was still in the ocean. I was wet, drenched in sweat, and... No, not. It didn't smell like sweat. It smelled like seawater. I spent the next few hours trying to do research on what Legras had said. Based on the details he had mentioned, I found some fragments. There were strange, disconnected news stories that seemed to fit together in some bizarre way. A tentacled face formed from the smoke of an exploding volcano. A mudslide in Malaysia that uncovered strange carvings in a sickeningly familiar shape. A congregation at a Pentecostal church that tried to hold a prayer service and all had seizures and strokes instead. And on top of all of it, reports of disturbed sleep and bizarre dreams in every pocket of the world. I searched Legras' name next, in hope of finding some of his work in case he had laid it out more clearly in his right mind. A few papers came up, mostly long, dry things about theology, but somewhere on the third page of results sat a link to an old news story. Federal raid on New Orleans cult compound leaves 5 dead, 47 arrested. I clicked on the link and scanned the page. It was a digitized story from a newspaper in 1994. Legras was only mentioned once in the middle of a list of survivors' names, but other details were more than a little disturbing. There was talk of a small statue, a fetish object that disappeared in the aftermath of the strange event, but no picture. When the sun rose, I drove out to the hospital and waited in my office for the patients to wake up. When everyone was moved into the cafeteria for breakfast, I walked across the room to Legras' table and sat down across from him. At the sight of me and the bags under my eyes, he smiled.
That's the look of a troubled man. Did you read the Necronomicon?
Considering the closest available copy is at a university 6 hours from here, and the only copy they have is in Latin, yeah, I think you know I haven't. It's not exactly something you can find as a PDF.
With that doctor in front of your name, I thought you might be better at doing research.
Oh, I've done plenty. Why don't you tell me about the Star Spawn congregation?
Wait, you don't... No, it hasn't happened yet, has it?
I don't know what you're talking about.
What is it that you'd like to know?
Is that raid what started all this for you? The obsession? One night in Louisiana 30 years ago?
There are decades when nothing happens, and days where decades happen.
What happened that night? What does it have to do with what's happening now?
There's a place just outside the city called Marsh Family Storage. Unit 1370 has a combination lock on it. The combination is 192500. There's a locked roll-top desk. The key for it is hidden inside a filing cabinet on the other side of the unit, in a folder marked SCS. Use the key, open the roll-top desk, and take out the package inside.
What?
I can repeat myself if you need to write it down.
No, what are you talking about?
You're going to need the contents of that drawer to believe what happens next.
I wrote down the information, only barely entertaining the idea of using it. I felt crazy even considering it, but it compelled me. There was something about all of it that seemed to fit together, but so many disparate pieces that never could. It had all the mania and complexity of 1,000 schizoid delusions, but a cogency that felt brutally, materially sane. I told management I was sick, and I went home before lunch, then paced back and forth in my apartment as I thought it all over. It felt like it was visible at the edge of my vision, but every time I turned my head, it disappeared. I couldn't hold all of it in front of me at once, or turn it over in my head like an architectural model. It was too messy, too jagged, and I was too sane. But I needed to know. I felt the desperate, clawing desire burning inside of me. I considered smoking something to keep my mind off it, but when I opened the drawer of my bedside table, a small stack of thin plastic bags caught my eye. I picked one up and held it in the light, eyeing the small, colorful stamp inside. Maybe that was what I needed. The drug of the scientist and the mystic alike. Lysergic acid. Madness in a tab. Well, it was good enough for the Greek oracle. Maybe it would work for me. Something about this felt right. Familiar. Necessary. I pressed it on my tongue and waited as it dissolved, then breathed in and imagined the smell of seawater. I held the thought in my head as I sat down and waited for it to kick in. It'd been a while since I'd taken the journey of the psychonaut. But...
Oh,
Sorry to have to wake you up, but we're almost there. Jesus, you sleep rough. You nod off for 20 minutes and you're already tossing and turning?
what? Who? Where am I?
You're in New Orleans, technically an hour outside. I'm Donovan. I picked you up at the airport, remember? Did you take something to help you sleep through the flight? Dr. LaGrosse.
I looked, bleary-eyed, at the policeman driving the car, then turned to look at my reflection in the passenger side window. What I saw there wasn't my face, but the face of William LaGrosse staring back. I raised a hand and ran it along my chin, then up to my hair. It was LaGrosse, but not as I knew him. He was decades younger, stronger, saner. When was this? And was it a memory or a hallucination? Oh, God. New Orleans. 1994.
The
Gras
grass
was...
I was doing a favor for a family friend. A dangerous favor, but one on behalf of a powerful man. I had received a call late one night from my father's college friend, Ted Whitlock, now a United States Senator on the verge of re-election. He told me that his daughter had joined some cult down in the South, and that he wanted me to find out what it was they believed, and if there was any way she could be talked out of it. The Whitlocks had been good to our family. It was on a Whitlock Fund scholarship that I got my degree, and that, alongside a promise of generous payment, made it hard to say no. Unfortunately, the nature and extremity of the favor had recently changed. Someone had slipped Senator Whitlock notice of an upcoming federal raid on a religious compound in rural Louisiana, the very same compound where his daughter was currently holed up. There was credible risk, according to the FBI, of a mass suicide. The only reason they hadn't gone in yet was the FBI leadership's fears of creating another Waco.
I still don't understand what you're doing here. I know the senator knows you, but you're not even wearing a gun, for Christ's sakes.
Wait, did I say all of that out loud?
What?
Never mind. As far as I can figure, the senator wants me to try and talk her out of it. The cult, or the suicide, if she's that committed. It would be quite a scandal if she was there when the raid happened.
If he wants talk, what am I doing here? Why hire a security firm?
Well, in case the talking doesn't work.
In my experience, it usually doesn't. Have you looked at the picture he gave us?
I didn't need to. I've known her since we were young.
What do you think? Will she come willingly? She doesn't quite look stable. What these people believe, is it?
A lot of it is fairly pedestrian, but the parts that aren't are quite exotic. They worship the so-called Great Old Ones, who lived billions of years ago and came from the sky when the Earth was young. Now these Old Ones, they're not exactly flesh and blood, but they're not exactly spirit either. According to legend, they have shape but not matter. Whatever that means. But apparently, when the stars are right, they can plunge from world to world through space. When the stars are wrong, they can't even live. Earth was occupied when they arrived, though, colonized by some other race of monsters. So the Old Ones, they went to war and lost badly. And now they're gone, lying in the dark inside the earth and under the sea, waiting for their leader, or priest, the word really doesn't translate directly, to rise and resurrect them. And even dead, their bodies told secrets in dreams to the first man who formed a cult that never died. And their priest, while he dreamed, slowly guided the evolution of life on Earth to shape a new breed of minds capable of being touched by his. And if you're sensitive, artistic, spiritual, insane, sometimes, just sometimes, you can hear his voice, his call, even through the immensity of the ocean. He needs help, you see. Help to let loose the other Old Ones, to throw open the door and let them spill out over the earth, to make us like them, free and wild and beyond good and evil, with laws and morals tossed aside, and everyone shouting and killing and reveling in joy. To turn an ancient defeat into a glorious revenge. Millions of years in the making.
They really believe that shit?
As far as I can tell. What I don't understand, though, is the mass suicide. If the cult is so ancient, and they've been waiting for so long, then what's the rush?
Well, if they were sane, they wouldn't be crazy, would they?
I guess you're right.
Do you think they're dangerous?
I don't know anyone religious that isn't. We parked almost half a mile from where the Starspawn congregation had made their compound. They had bought, coerced, and chased the locals out, and brought more and more of their commune in until they owned the entire town. It was surrounded by the swamp, and in parts half sunken and submerged, which made our approach on foot difficult, bordering on impossible. Donovan would dart ahead in small bursts, scouting out the path, then return to my side and escort me closer. As we came near to the edge of the small, dark town, we began to hear the slow, steady beat of drums. There were rumors about the town from before the congregation had taken it over. Stories told about giant, bat-winged monsters that lived in the swamp, worshipping some huge, white, formless thing that lived underwater and made men dream. The townsfolk had... Wait. I don't know that yet. I learned that years later, when I had regained my sanity enough to come back to Louisiana for some explanation. Regained my sanity? From what? From tonight? My sanity. The sanity of William McGrath? Or Anthony Wilcox? Who is Anthony Wilcox?
Dr. LaGrasse, are you all right?
What?
I signaled for you to move up. Couldn't you see me?
I don't know. Haven't we done this before? You and I, years ago. Oh, God, we came through the swamp, went to the fire at the center of town, and we saw...
What are you talking about?
I think I'm losing my mind.
Listen to me. I didn't spend 8 months shooting my way through Desert fucking Storm to get killed by some idiot having a panic attack and giving our position away. One way or another, I'm going in there. So go the fuck home or shut the fuck up.
I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening to me.
I don't care what's happening to you. Stow it until the job is done.
He waited, staring at me until I nervously nodded and continued walking. The sound of drums rose, almost rippling out through the water and mud. And I swore the dark trees were moving on their own as we passed through them. The world seemed to tremble and warp around us, jittering like a reel of film slipping off a projector. It all seemed so unreal. A cult, a rescue mission, an ornery mercenary walking me to my doom. Was any of it happening at all? I had taken something, hadn't I? Not me, but I. We walked past a few empty buildings at the outskirts of the waterlogged town, finally stepping up onto the rickety wooden walkways and out of the mire. Our boots squelched, but the mud covered the sound of our footsteps. There was no one in any of the buildings we passed. No loungers on porches and no lights in windows. Red light danced out from the center of town, sending streaks of color splashing down the streets and onto buildings. Under the drums, we began to hear voices.
Finglui, Mignafa, Cthulhu, Relaya, Wignoggle, Fatagan, Finglui, Mignafa, Cthulhu, Relaya, Wignoggle, Fatagan.
We walked slowly on the wooden walkways towards the town square, keeping to the darkness where we could. Soon, we crept through the shadows of writhing, exultant bodies cast against the rundown buildings like shadow puppets of the mad. Donovan held a hand out and stopped me, then reached down and drew his gun from its holster. He gestured forward, pointing me towards the edge of the building in front of us, the last before we fully entered the square. I sidled along the wall, then slowly ducked my head out to look at the scene. There were people everywhere. Dozens, jumping and dancing and shaking like worms after a lightning strike. Most were naked, or half covered in shreds of torn-up clothing, and some were streaked in what might have been mud, or paint, or blood. At the center of the square, the land dipped down into a muddy basin, where a gigantic fire had been lit over a pile of wooden boats, and porches, and sheds. The massive flame towered over the dancers, and at the center of the pyre, a huge stone pillar jutted up through the curls of fire. On top of the pillar sat a statuette, almost comically small for the size of its platform, but gleaming green and black as the flames twisted and writhed around it. It didn't look like obsidian or pewter or even emerald. It looked like nothing of this earth. I scanned the reveling crowd for the face of Whitlock's daughter, the face of a girl I had sung happy birthday to, while she beamed from behind candles and a cake all those years ago. I wondered if the time had changed her. She was 6 years younger than me, 8, which would make her... Sudden movement in front of the fire caught my eye, and I watched as a tall, thin figure stepped up onto the smoldering edge of the burning pile of discarded wood. Her hair flared out as the wind swept through, and I recognized her. The crowd around her cheered, and in the firelight, there were faces there I recognized too, remembered in some strange, sick way with eyes that weren't mine. There were dark, mud-streaked faces of doctors, nurses, fellow patients from an art therapy group I didn't belong to yet. They couldn't really be here. Some of them might not have been born yet, but I saw them. Whitlock's daughter thrust her hand down into the crowd, dropping onto all fours like a feral animal, then sprang up and raised a curved, gleaming object into the air as the crowd cheered. It was a knife. I turned back to call for Donovan, but he was already next to me. I turned back just in time to see Whitlock's daughter plunge the knife down into her stomach, then drag it up into her ribcage as she let out a mad, triumphant shriek. The blood didn't seep or pour so much as burst, soaking the closest cultists as they cheered. The blood was hot on their skin, forming clouds of red steam that rose up off their bodies and joined the pillar of flame. Whitlock's daughter flung her hair up and fell backwards onto the pyre, half impaling herself on a sharp wooden beam. Instantly, her hair began to glow, It ignited, suddenly bathing her head in flame, and she didn't stop laughing until her lips had charred and blown away. Another cultist climbed up onto the smoldering pile of wood and reached into the fire, drawing the knife from the burning body and holding it up to show the crowd. With another cheer, he raked it down from the inside of his elbow to his wrist, flinging his palm out to splash blood into the throng of moving bodies. Sense left me then, or I wish that it would have. I tried to avert my eyes, shot my head up to look above the fire at the cloud of smoke, but what I saw there brought me no comfort. There were things flying in the smoke, soaring in dizzying circles like drunken birds, tearing at each other with teeth and claws as their membranous wings flared and twisted through bows of burning ash. In seconds, a rain of hot, steaming blood poured down out of the billowing smoke, baptizing the maniac crowd as they raised their hands to vacant heaven. As the crimson raid spattered into the mud beneath them, the ground itself seemed to heave with breath, and when I looked down through the slats of the wooden walkway, I could see the brown of the mud turning into a brilliant, bioluminescent white. I could feel it in my head, the sudden gibbering stabs of a cacophonous madness older than time. This couldn't be happening, but reality itself was changing without my permission, space and time shredding into an all-consuming firestorm of primordial metal. Then, a shock of blinding light jarred me back into cogent thought, and I looked around to see huge spotlights encircling the clearing. I heard boots in mud, gunshots, handcuffs, orders to surrender shouted through a megaphone, and the last thing I saw before I lost my mind and ran screaming from the oncoming federal agents will stay with me until the day I die. And perhaps beyond. The last thing I saw before my mind went dark was Donovan pressing his gun to the bottom of his chin and pulling the trigger.
Dark. Why is it so fucking dark? Please. There has to be something there. Is that the walls? Oh God. It's padded. Please, there's been a mistake. Whatever's happened, you gotta let me out of here. I am not insane. This time when I awoke, I could see my hands. But instead of being bloody, cut, or shredded from being thrust through the glass of a barred window, they were covered in half-dried clay. I looked up, looked around. I was back in my apartment, in the tiny narrow hall just off the kitchen, and warm yellow light was flooding in from the door. I crawled, then pushed off the wall to unsteady feet and stumbled into the lit-up kitchen. There, at the center of a pile of unfolded newspapers, looming above stories about disastrous weather, mysterious deaths, and insanity that spread like a plague, was a small, squat sculpture that I knew my hands had formed. I drove to Marsh Family Storage next. I still had 2 hours until sunrise, even with a half hour on the road, and I knew I could be waiting at the hospital in time to interrogate Legras during morning room checks. I was desperate for something, anything to hold on to. Some real, tangible proof that what I had experienced wasn't the truth. If only all I had found was some notebook full of mad scribblings, or some wall with push pins and red string. I had his instructions written down. The number on the storage unit, the combination on the lock, the key for the roll-top desk with the package inside it. But when I tore away the thick brown paper tied around the small, heavy object and recognized the shape of its grotesque, bulging head at first glance, it almost made me sick. I unwrapped it and set it down on the desk, shining the flashlight from my phone across its ornately carved surface. It had it all. Every last common element. The throng of tentacles at the bottom of the head. The bulging corpse-bloat stomach. The folded draconic wings and the demoniac slothful slouching pose atop a squat stone block with bizarre, jagged letters carved into its surface. I knew what they meant. Or Legras knew what they meant, and now I knew too. I could read them. More or less. I looked up at the statuette's head as if I was expecting it to speak. But the asymmetric collection of pock-sore eyes just stared at me. It wasn't made of clay, of obsidian or pewter or emerald or anything else mined under the rocky folds of the earth. It was black and green, cool to the touch and softened by millions of years of hands holding it. It was theirs, an object of worship of the great old ones, passed down to their pathetic heirs on this burning planet of the insane, spinning off into the yawning dark like a marble into a hurricane, stolen by a mad doctor. But if it was true, if all of it was true, why had the cult failed? We were 30 years past their intended doomsday. Was it because they'd been interrupted? Or weren't the stars right? I got back to the hospital with time to spare, and as soon as the night nurses came to unlock the front door, I was there to meet them. Can you find me someone for a patient escort? Have them sent to my office.
Dr. Wilcox?
I know. I look like shit. Please. The patient's name is William Legras. I need to see him.
You need to... I thought you were here because you heard.
Heard? Heard what?
William Legras is dead. He started screaming in the middle of the night, and when we opened the door to his room, he'd broken the window and slit his throat with the glass.
I might have fainted then, or staggered. But my next sensible thought came as I sat on the floor, leaned against the side of a gurney. I suspect I might not ever recover. Whoever I was the night before, that man died in his sleep. I'm only a corpse that continues walking to Armageddon. I've read the Necronomicon now, seen in context what I'd previously read carved into the base of statuettes, or heard chanted by the ecstatic insane. I know now what it means, what it all means. But before I join Dr. Legras, there is one thing I have to do. He left notes for me, instructions, a name and an address of a professor he knew from Chicago. If there was anyone who could understand what we'd uncovered, Legras thought it would be him. For what it's worth, I didn't think it would make a difference, but I knew I owed a debt. To Legras, to myself, to everyone in universities and churches and psych wards the world over, to anyone still sane. We needed to know. We needed to be warned. What Legras had warned, what inscription recorded, and mad cultists repeated as a promise. Those words. those hideous, undying words. In his sunken house at Relea, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming.
To be continued. The Call of Cthulhu, Part 1, was written and directed by Jonathan Inbody, and adapted from the story of the same name by H.P. Lovecraft. It was edited by Jeffrey Lavin, with music composed and performed by Samantha Hunt. The narrators, Wilcox and Legras, were played by Paul McGinnis and Mark Bogumil. Eric Miller played Donovan, Andrea Inbody played the nurse, and Sam Hunt and Jonathan Inbody played the mental patients.
Gray Matter is a Word Search Media production. Any similarities to real people, places, or things is purely coincidental.
If you like the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And support us at patreon.com/graymatterhorror.
Be kind. Rewind.